Fest, the world's largest virtual conference organized by FinTech Convergence Council of IAMAI and National Payments Corporation of India, presented by the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, and Reserve Bank of India, powered by Amazon Pay and brought to you by WhatsApp and Google Pay, took place on the 22nd and 23rd of July 2020. The event was supported by the World Bank and the United Nations Capital Development Fund. The two-day event, with the theme FinTech with and beyond COVID, had witnessed participation from more than 8,000 delegates from 100 plus countries, 160 Indian and international industry experts as speakers, and 75 exhibitors. Let's take a look at some of the key moments of the event.
If there is one area where I think the big differentiation of banking, even in the future, will be, is the area of risk and risk management. Because finally, that is an area which is at the core of banking. When you're managing other people's money, you have to be even more careful with that than you are with your own money. Because recklessness has been one of the problems which the financial industry worldwide has seen, essentially around measurement of risk. And I think the danger with digital and models is they are much more on the past. And when I think about models, even in India, pre-COVID, did those models factor COVID? No. And what will happen in the future to those models, especially in fintech based and AI based lending, which has happened in the Indian consumer industry unsecured? I think the jury is out. Therefore, I agree many parts of profit pools will be taken away by competitive factors outside banking, because a customer wants a service, not necessarily the entity which provides the service. But one area where banks will always be able to differentiate, as long as I can see, is in the area of risk management, where in addition to data and analytics, we will have to figure out how judgment becomes a core part of a model. And that is the most difficult part to put in place. Is that the financial sector on a broader basis, without getting into public sector or private sector, is heading for greater consolidation because of the assets risks which the financial sector is carrying. And over time, capital is going to be critical. What is needed is capital, risk management expertise, and an ability to govern institutions on a sustainable basis. Why can't we in India think about something which we saw a bank like JP Morgan maybe more than 100 years ago, and the Mr. JP Morgan is no longer there, but the institution carries on forever. We need to think about institutions in perpetuity. We cannot think about our framework as short term, and we really need to build an Indian financial sector which is of global quality and size, rather than worrying about A or B. And therefore, I am saying consolidation will happen. What shape it takes really depends on the nature of this COVID situation and the depth of this crisis, which will determine the speed of change which we will see.
Balagan sir, first question I want to ask is that SEBI has come out with this regulatory sandbox. Can you explain the intent of the sandbox and how it will benefit the fintechs?
Thank you, Srinivas, for that question. Actually, that's one of the major initiatives that has been taken by SEBI very recently. In fact, the other regulator, RBI, had also taken that initiative about a couple of months before SEBI. Clearly, the intent behind this kind of a sandbox is to ensure that, number one, we bring in a lot of innovations into the market. The small fintech firms with innovative minds, they get to play a constructive role in the market to make the efficiency, to take the efficiency levels higher, to reduce the cost, and to ensure that overall there is a systemic improvement for the consumers, the market consumers. That's how it is actually. Now, basically when you get into this, I think you have two types of sandboxes that SEBI was talking about. One is the innovation sandbox and the other is a regulatory sandbox. Both are clearly serving similar purposes. The innovation sandbox is more from the perspective that was issued, that circular was issued in May of 2019. The idea there was to encourage the small fintech firms to come up with some, innovations which would be very useful. And what the entities would be doing, the entities which are running the innovation sandbox would be doing, would be providing them the market related data, particularly the trading data, the holdings data. These are two critical points of data. You can also get some order logs and trade logs and that kind of information. And these data could be used in a kind of a live environment for those fintechs to see how successful their innovations are. Now, these are entities which are not regulated by SEBI. I'm making a very clear distinction. Whereas the regulatory sandbox is meant for the regulated entities, this particular innovation sandbox is meant for non-regulated entities, which means even the small fintech firms, including individuals. I'm stressing it, including individuals, they can come and then they can actually do an offline testing of their proposed solutions. The data will be made available to these people by the stock exchanges, depositories, qualified RTAs, and as I told you, all this data will span across several important things, and these data points are historical. Obviously, they will not be current, and they are anonymized, so obviously the names will not be revealed at all, and they will be bound by certain comprehensive confidentiality agreements. Now, these are the basic starting points with which the innovation sandboxes are going to work, and these data sets will be shared through APIs, the application program interfaces actually. Now, these innovation sandboxes can be set up as a kind of a non-profit entity by the respective entities here. But these innovation sandboxes, nevertheless, I need to emphasize here, they have to comply with KYC norms. There will be no relaxation in investor protection norms and data integrity laws. These are something on which we are not going to compromise at all. Now, these will also ensure, as I said right at the beginning, these are meant for the improvement of the capital market. If by any chance these are going to be for any kind of manipulative purposes or fraudulent purposes, they are not going to be allowed at all. There are elaborate administrative procedures which have been set in place to ensure that the people who have the eligibility, they will be allowed to come in to this area to actually practice these sandboxes. Now, from the innovator's angle, clearly this is going to reduce the time by which the entire authorization is given for this thing, for this particular sandbox, and he will be able to work on the real data which is made available to him, although it is going to be in an anonymized form. Such kind of sandboxes, I am very sure, over a period of time, will improve the access to capital of several entities, and the cost will come down in a very big way. And if you look at the consumer angle, the consumer is going to be the immense beneficiary of these kinds of sandboxes. Number one, he is going to have safer products, newer products. It is going to increase access to several products to him, and the protection available to him is also going to be higher. It also reduces the risk for the consumer. There are other things that I don't want to talk about here, but this is the broad framework of the sandboxes that SEBI is contemplating. And this is a kind of broad sandbox, the framework, which many of the other regulators across the world are also practicing. In fact, SEBI's work, I would say, is definitely not original. It has actually captured the good points from several other jurisdictions, and it has also taken into account what RBI has come up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Manikam sir. I think it's pretty encouraging that SEBI has been moving in the direction. I think after your talk today, I'm sure more fintechs would be looking at the document around sandbox and see how they can get access to this particular sandbox. I know it's early days, but I'm sure more and more fintechs will use both the regulatory sandbox and the innovation sandbox.
There are 2-3. I'll talk about changes which are going to come, which are tremendously exciting. One is, I think 5G is going to be a really big deal. As and when it stabilizes and people start accessing it, the speed will be just completely something else. The fact that internet in rural areas is only 25%. Can you think about it when internet in rural area touches penetration touches something like 90%, how vast parts of rural India can get penetrated and what the opportunity in that space is will be just unbelievable. Even the profile I talked about being able to provide, we provide biometric, but we haven't really taken internet so much to the bottom of the pyramid, even in urban areas. The credit to GDP being so low, mutual fund to GDP being so low, insurance to GDP being so low, everything is low in this country in a penetration sense. So, the fact that they will all exponentially change and catch up the global benchmarks, is tremendously exciting. The fact that the payment railroads have come. So I think the whole ecosystem is frankly something that not only fintechs, everybody should look forward to. First of all, of course, UPI has been our extraordinary achievement as a country. So today we heard recurring UPI becoming another big feature that's coming up, which we should all be very happy about. The thing is that the importance of growing the acceptance network, particularly through the QR code method, is going to be very important for the country. It's not just the UPI, because UPI is of course great, but for example, Bharat QR pretty much in a costless way you can now take it to the rural areas. The key thing I am looking forward to is how we can enable micro transactions in a contextual way with high quality of experience. Micro transactions. It's because that's where the big game is, and I think in terms of bringing people into financial inclusion, I don't mean financial inclusion of bank accounts. Of course, it is there, but through every other means we talked about in terms of insurance, mutual fund, this, that, advisory. You think of wealth management. We provide wealth management as a country to all the rich people and so on and so forth. But for a poor person, even a scooter is wealth. For a poor person, even 50,000 rupees is wealth. But we don't see, from our eyes, of our income level, we don't see it as wealth, but from their point of view, it's wealth. So we have not provided wealth management to poor at all. So basically, to be able to take it there will be one of our big achievements as a country.
Welcome back. You're watching Global FinTech Fest. We bring you more glimpses from this exclusive coverage of the event.
I think from my perspective, time has come. We have to shift our gear. And I've been telling in many conferences that we have to shift our gear from productivity and efficiency to sustainability and resiliency. I think that's the new key term, because that's how we should think about. Once you have a resilient and a sustainable system, you can think about productivity. But to me, productivity is a default. If you are doing digital transformation, that comes with it. You don't have to work hard towards productivity. It is part of the DNA of getting digital. Got to focus on a sustainable system where we are far more inclusive than we stand today. And I think through the crisis and coming out of the crisis, a lot of fintechs will start pivoting themselves to focus on this space, because this has not only a problem to be solved for, there is also huge revenue opportunity. There are significant money to be made by fintechs if they think that way in this space, if you get it right, if the construct is rightly done. And as Surina was talking about, I think one of the quite evident in the market in ASEAN at least, that a lot of small medium enterprise are rapidly picking up the digital transformation. And in our own policy action right through the crisis, we saw the demand for digital tools just went through the roof. Yep. So there is this appetite to digitize your own systems and processes, and hopefully get that whole experience down to employees and the consumers downstream. But one striking shift, which now the market has done, is the issuance of new digital bank licenses. I think that's something fintechs in India must look for too. I think this is something different, and I want to spend a minute on that. Out of the 10 markets, 6 markets have issued somewhere between 20 to 21 new digital bank licenses, largely retail licenses or something around wholesale licenses, wholesale bank licenses, which means this market will have a futuristic construct of financial industry, which will serve this huge segment in a very different way. And this is where the new construct, the new infrastructure will be played out, the new APIs, the new B2B fintechs, they will be the new plugin to this new infrastructure. And having 20 plus new bank licenses, new bank construct, clearly creates an opportunity to digitize faster, also adopt a lot of new technologies from outside wherever they can get the best solution. So that's on the infrastructure piece. You also asked a question around digital currency. I'm trying to get through very quickly so that we don't lose time in this whole process. There are two kinds of digital currency. I think the one which MAS speaks a lot about is the wholesale side. Why we talk about wholesale currency? Because wholesale currency, if you think about digital currency, there are two ways to think. There's a monetary thinking and there's a payment innovation thinking. Wholesale currency is around payment innovation. It fixes a classic problem around settlement efficiency of moving money, especially when it comes to cross-border. So this obsession we have to get the wholesale currency right is to solve the cross-border payment issues which still exist in this market. And that's where we are pushing for. And lastly, to end my thinking around on this, what is happening on the infrastructure space, we're also looking at connecting all this national infrastructure among each other, because interoperability, data streams, being able to talk to each other with thoughtful policy becomes a key enabler for the market to operate. And to end this up as a top to this whole beautiful plan is there are platforms around SMEs which are coming up in this market, and they are digital platform. One of the initiatives which MAS has been pushing hard is build something called SME connectivity platforms, and is interoperable, it is open, there's no proprietary closed loop system. How to bring SMEs to the digital platforms, connect them is a key infrastructure push for the market.
Just to give a perspective, we handle on a daily basis 100 million digital transactions in the present day. And this value is about 5 lakh crores of rupees, or simply put 5 trillion rupees. And when I say digital, of course, it doesn't include paper. Paper also clears quite a huge volume of instruments across the country on a T+1 basis. This figure of 100 million, if you look back a couple of months back prior to the start of the COVID or even the lockdown in India, was around 120 million a day. And last year around this time, if you look at the volume of transactions on a daily basis, it was around 85 million. So typically we are seeing a huge increase year on year. And just let me go back 5 years period to 2016 June, it was only 22 million. So in the last 5 years, we have seen a significant growth in digital transactions at a compounded annual growth rate of 58% in volume terms, and of course 15% in value. We are seeing these digital payments being used for small value payments by increasing number of users. So the future is tremendous and sizable if you look at just the linear trend as well. And when I look at the past 5-year period, significant events have happened as well. For example, demonetization, how can we forget that event? And COVID-19, we are still seeing the impact of COVID. And there have been quite a number of systems that have been launched, like the popular Unified Payments Interface, with its 2.0 versions and some more initiatives being planned by Dilip and team. The Bharat Bill Payment System, which has taken the bill payments to a next level. Multiple biller categories have been facilitated. As I see, the bill categories and payments volume are only around, say, 20%, and the scope is enormous to add more volumes and categories as well. And of course, we have the transit and mobility payments like NETC, or National Electronic Toll Collection, the FASTag-based ones, the Common Mobility Card, and of course, I can't forget NEFT 24/7 being operationalized.
What is the future of a bank?
So, the banks, we will have to determine what they are going to look like. They could be actually asset light and distribution heavy, okay? Or they could lead with liabilities and be asset light as well. So, there are a number of things that are going to happen. It is not true that all banks will be similar. Banks will be different because they will concentrate on different niche items. But it's also true that there could be banks that addresses across the board most of these niche. Okay. So I think, going forward, you will see that workplaces will begin to look different. Brick and mortar, while it will still be there, because, at the end of the day, people trust a bank which can be seen physically. So it will still be there. It will not disappear. But the importance of that brick and mortar will come down. So you will still be then able to access and do everything that you need to do from the comfort of your room. But when there is a need that you really want to go out and talk to a person, you will be able to do that because that setup will also have to be maintained. So, nowhere am I saying that we are looking at a world where the workplaces will disappear altogether. That's not going to happen.
If India's economy has to grow, we have to give loans to SMEs. And SME restrictions and definitions that they can be labeled a priority sector are not in tune with the market requirement. Give you an example, as in here, if you are a restaurant that is trying, let's say you are a small restaurant who's opened the shop with a couple of lakh rupees and as a capital, and you paid some rent. Now, you may not be able to get a loan that will be treated as a priority sector just because you do not have a chartered accountant to give a certificate that the amount of money that you spent on the opening of this capital infrastructure is less than 10 lakh rupees. And just because it is not, a traditional bank will not even come to knock at your door to give you loan, and you will get loan sharks to give you loan. So the idea here is that I believe that the biggest thing that government should do is to help SMEs get loans, and then this journey to digitize. For example, like there is an Aadhaar digitization where if a customer has verified, we trust that the customer is real. Obviously, many other KYC methods also exist where the customer is real. The cost there can be different, and you may or may not choose to do those as a customer. Now, the idea is that there is no such thing for SME. SME, I require a business KYC, then I require owner's KYC. So it is too earnest for us to issue a loan to SME, which is...
How interesting.
It is.
So you're come up with a one business KYC, and maybe you can combine it with like an account aggregator model, right? Get all their data, it's all in one place, one click.
Yeah. We talked about GSTN, account aggregator, and all those kind of elements, but they apply for a top strata of the customers. We don't talk about 50 million of SMEs in that bucket. Because number one, GST is not an obligation to a particular size, as you know, because of the restriction and complications. And number two, that you do not even have necessary permissions or the documentations that enable you to get a cheaper loan. Otherwise, you will get a loan shark loan. So if we believe that India's economy has to become that $5 trillion economy, we have to give power of our economic growth to these SMEs. And these SMEs will be receiving this wealth only if somebody as a government and a regulator in tandem are working on bringing digitization as a smooth flow. Just like today, you can literally link a bank account and make a payment. Easily transfer money like from any bank account to any bank account, or do payment on a shop using a QR, even if you don't have a POS machine. That is not possible when I want to give a loan. So I believe that the biggest thing the government should look at in an economic BFSI space is identification and verification and KYC, etc., mandates that are given for SMEs. If we are changing that, that's a beginning of. It's like saying doing Series A funding in startups.
What are really what has changed, and what are the permanent sort of shifts in behavior or in how business is going to be done in the future, and which of these areas are being accelerated? And I think, in the short term, we see obviously gaming and other forms of digital entertainment going through the roof, simply because there's a lot of activity or a lot of time being spent online these days. I think more interestingly, I'm asking myself, what are the second order implications of sort of the hype cycles? So let's say everybody's going to shop online from here going forward. What are the secondary implications, right? And I think payments is a huge benefactor of the same in payments and infrastructure, anything in fintech that supports the digital economy. And then as a sort of like layer, if you layer it on top of each other, anything at the bottom of the stack is very, very interesting and very de-risk as well. But I think there are also new categories being born. Another area maybe, and then I stop, is really the digitalization of any workflow in retail, right? So like the Kirana stores will not stop to exist. The question is, how can they reinvent themselves? And a lot of that has to do with software. So I think it's a great time. Sometimes we don't realize, I think, because we live in this world, right, how privileged we are. But I think even in our industry, we will go and look back at 2020 as a major catalyst event for fintech, but for commerce online and digital transformation in general. So I think it's a phenomenal time to invest and be part of this ecosystem.
We would like to extend our gratitude to our partners, exhibitors, supporters, and attendees from all around the globe who have helped us make this event a virtual and grand success. Thank you and stay safe.